Taking a break from his busy schedule of hand-washing and rewatching Tiger King. It's time for BSing with Big Nate.
Welcome into another edition of BSing with Big Nate. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a lovely day to talk about some cool things. Of course, I've been trying to keep this going and talk to interesting people I know, talk to musicians, artists, and there was a huge void in what I've talked about, and it's someone I've known for many years, is a man by the name of Josh Haney. I met him, God, we've got to at least have known each other for 10 years now. We met online. And
more than that. I mean, you're talking back in World Horror Network days.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time. Yeah, it could be, we could be going on 11 years. The point is, I've known Josh for a while. He is a man who's done a lot of things, writing, music, cinematography, videos, and he's very involved, as I am, in the horror scene. So a couple weeks ago did a list of quarantine movies, and I found myself kept circling back to horror. So I thought, man, that's a good idea. Let's get Josh on here. So it's the man, the myth, the legend, the one they call Josh. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, please. Thanks for having me, man. Thanks for having me.
So I want to start with a little bit of a catch-up. What have you been up to these days?
Well, let's see. Recently, when not writing and recording, I do work as an EMT here in New York, and I'm an emergency room tech. So with the whole quarantine, COVID, et cetera, going on, that's occupied quite a bit of time. Last year, I wonder if I have a copy somewhere. Last year, I released a new book that was called Sentence Fragments from a Broken Mind. And there you go. I thought I might have a copy.
I happen to have my copy. Also got the locket here.
Yes, the locket.
Right side up. Another story.
Sentence Fragments came out last Halloween, shortly before last Halloween, and Sentence Fragments is more of a it's a collection of short stories that appeared in magazines and fiction collections that are like predominantly long out of print. And I had a lot of people that were asking me, hey, where can I get this story, or where can I get that story? And when I would go on to eBay and, as we all do, and type in, this magazine, and I see copies of the magazine selling for $80, $90. And I'm like, that is ridiculous. First and foremost, there is nothing that I've written in there that is well worth $80 or $90. So, I tried to make it easy on everybody and put them all together in one book and released it in a budget price that pretty much anybody can afford.
Not $80. That's got to be pretty wild, though, to go back and look for something you were a part of. I'd have to, anything I wrote, I would have to pay someone $80. Please take this, get this off my hands. So that's looking as an author. That's got to be pretty wild to see that price tag.
It is, but the thing is a lot of those magazines had multiple authors in them. They had movie reviews. They had all kinds of things. So I significantly doubt that any of it has to do with a piece of my work. I could sit there and really, stoke the ego and be like, oh yeah, but for the most part, no, it's a lot of them were magazines that had, very limited runs. So, I mean, you're talking about a magazine that might have only printed 100 copies, 200 copies. And, a lot of us are completists. So, everybody wants, you see that glaring hole when you're flipping through your comics or you're flipping through your magazines, and you're like, okay, number 12, number 14. Shit. So, I mean, I'm not gonna toot my own horn and make believe like I'm, the reason that it's worth $80. But I could not in all good conscience look at a friend of mine and be like, yeah, give this guy $80 and shkabam, you can have this.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that humility, but the argument could be made in the other direction, though, is it's valued at $80. People are paying for it, and your work is included in there. So,
right,
I mean,
right, and
if you won't discuss the ego of it, I will.
Hey, that's fine and good. I mean, I still have stashed away that I've been working on it, little bits and pieces here and there. Night Howls, which you were nice enough to give me the option to do my little splatter undead western piece and do it piece by piece on your website, and it's
so
that's one that's never been released.
I have to give a little backstory on that. A lot of our Bear listeners probably don't know, but through my college days, I ran a weekly radio show on local public radio station 89.9 WVRU, and I also ran a website in conjunction with it called HorrorShareRadio.com, and the whole thing was it was all horror themed because that was my biggest thing. And Josh was kind enough to come on as a weekly writer, and what he's talking about right there is Night Howls. It was a serial. There was some pretty wild stuff. I've actually between I got to pull out my old external, but I've still got a major portion of it. So I know actually in my copy of Sentence Fragments, you did write, "Just wait until Night Howls."
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm waiting. I'm excited. I'm stoked.
Yeah. Night Howls is so on my side of that, you and I had just done my band, Josh Haney and the Nightmare Factory. We had done a live conjuration to the god Yog Sothoth on Halloween night on your program, of which a lot of people don't know. You were one of the hidden voices of the cultists. And originally that was released. When that came out, I released 31 copies of it that were all handmade by me and were given out to friends. And then later it was released on the CD Gruesome Twosome, which came out, and that was a double live disc that featured the conjuration that was called A Horror Unleashed from Stygian Depths, and it also was a live performance of the Halloween 3 Silver Shamrock theme.
Which is still an incredibly underrated movie.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. That is easily one of the best representations of folk horror that is around. I mean, everybody's now jumping on the folk horror thing, and they're talking about Midsommar, which was amazing. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me started on it. I love that movie. But there was so much in the realm of folk horror within Halloween 3 Season of the Witch that should be talked about. But back to the original tale. So after that, you had approached me about doing a serial, and would I be interested in trying to do a chapter a month kind of thing and see? And it ended up with it was the Night Howls was the tale of a Seamus McGee who was a kind of like an Old West Sherlock Holmes kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, and it was basically a splatter Western, centered around a town that I had lived in Colorado, where there was an urban legend in the local cemetery there was a grave in this town in the center of the cemetery. The grave was all overgrown with like thorn bushes. And right in the center of the grave was this giant evergreen tree. And if you pulled back the thorn bushes, and I have pictures of it around somewhere, but if you pull back the thorn bushes, all that it said on the tombstone was born in Transylvania. And I remember hanging out at this cemetery one night, and that whole idea came to me. And then when you and I started talking about this, I started writing Night Howls. And there was Night Howls kind of got interrupted because I got divorced, and I ended up leaving out west and moving east, and so it was put on hiatus for a while, and then I released one more chapter with you. So I think right now there were like a total of 7 or 8 chapters released.
Yeah,
I think is what it was, and originally it was supposed to be a splatter western in 13 parts is what it was supposed to be. And then every week to try to get people in the mood and to go with the radio show you were doing, I was making suggestions of music to go along with it. Things from Ghoultown and Johnny Cash and Shooter Jennings and Psycho Charger and the Coffin Shakers, and all of these weird like gothabilly bands and alt country bands, and and that was when I was trying to write. That's what I was listening to. Was I was listening to those kind of bands, and and dipping into a lot of that like old Long Black Veil kind of stuff, and that's what came out of it.
I didn't really think too much about it when it was happening, but that is something that's a really cool concept, is the throwing in the music that you're listening to at the time. For instance, like, this goes back to high school for me. I was reading the Amityville Horror.
Yes.
And like, I can never separate the Amityville Horror and Skinny Puppy's Too Dark Park, because I'd gotten really into Skinny Puppy at the time, and I would just turn that on and read the Amityville Horror. So like, the two are just intertwined, and it's just this like atmospheric thing.
And there's a lot of that there's a lot of that really that plays into things that I read when I was young. And some of the like really like standout examples to me are things like Stephen King always made references to songs. Whether it was like in The Stand, it was always like of course there was Baby Can You Dig Your Man, that song that he wrote, but then there were references to other songs to kind of set that mood. Bret Easton Ellis did the same thing with American Psycho. There are references to Phil Collins, and there's references to this and that, and and for me, like with Night Howls, I mean, even when I write, I listen to music. Hell, when I drive, I listen. I mean, music means a lot to me. And in the back of my first book, The Horror of It All, was a rather exhaustive list of like all of the bands that I had been listening to while I was writing The Horror of It All, and that all just kind of progressed along. And then there've been songs that I will borrow lyrics from for specific stories, and drop them in there and what have you. Unconditional Armistice, which was in Sentence Fragments, which is kind of like so Sentence Fragments contained a couple of stories that were part of the like zombie oeuvre that I had tried to do. I wanted to do a zombie book years ago. And then all of a sudden there was this giant glut of zombie books on the market. And I was like, you know, what the fuck do I have to say that, you know, 10,000 other people, you know, but I was trying to work on this zombie book that was basically looking at the zombie apocalypse through a bunch of different disjointed stories, of which Tonight's Entertainment is one of them, of which Unconditional Armistice was one of them, and basically none of them ever meet up, but you know, you can kind of piece this to this to this to this to this to this. So like Unconditional Armistice was actually lyrics of a song by Death in June. You know, I used lyrics from the band Left for Dead out of Salt Lake City. I mean, there's a lot of different, you know, bands that I've thrown lyrics in now and then. But with Night Howls, it was one of those things where, like, it was important to me to get people into like a specific headspace. You know, it was important to have them, you know, hear that slide guitar and the crow squawking in the background kind of thing. And the easiest way to do that was you know, bands that had that kind of sound.
That needs to be more of a thing, because, like, you know, the whole, if you watch The Wizard of Oz and put on Dark Side of the Moon, if you sync them up right, money plays when she puts on the ruby red slippers. Yep. That needs to be a thing for books, though. I think now, like, I've got a new calling in life. Is I'm just going to go in and assign an atmosphere to everything, just using music. I think
that's not a bad thing. I mean, honestly speaking, like one of my favorite albums, and it's not an old album, but one of the albums that, like, even now I keep finding myself drawn back to is Black Ribbons by Shooter Jennings, which, you know, is his like tale of like a dystopian America, and Stephen King does voiceovers in it, and like you listen to the story of that, you listen to the music behind that, you know, that still pulls me in constantly. I mean, that I listen to that album probably once or twice a week. You know, and like story albums have always been like a big deal to me. You know, it just, there's something about that where you're searching through it and trying to find like missing pieces and like hidden ideas and hidden agendas and things like that. You know, most recently, at least in recent memory, I think the closest to that would have been the 9 Inch Nails Year Zero album, where they had the album, and then they had like they had videos that were appearing online that were tied into the album, and like if you bought the album, there was a phone number on the back of the album, and if you called it, it would play a Morse code thing, which would lead you to a website, which would lead you to this, which would lead you to that. And that kind of stuff has always fascinated me, this like multi-layered approach to thought and entertainment. You know, but that goes back to things like, you know, things that I listened to growing up. Like I listened to a lot of Psychic TV and a lot of Throbbing Gristle, you know, and you know, these bands like that had, you know, all of these odd ideas, and for me, reading as well as music as well as film, it's always been about like connecting the dots. So, you know, Throbbing Gristle would lead me to William S. Burroughs, and William S. Burroughs would lead me to this film, and then, you know, this film would come back around and lead me to this person. And, you know, and I always thought that kind of stuff was so cool, because like nowadays, and I've had this discussion with a lot of people, nowadays you can put anything into the internet and it just wall of information. And I think that takes some of the fun out of it, you know, because it's not like, you know, it's not like going through a pile of records, and, you know, and you take the record and you put the record on the turntable and you listen to the record, and then you take the package apart and you start kind of like trying to figure out, like, oh, well, what artist did this? Or, you know, and Skinny Puppy's a perfect representation of that kind of stuff too, because it was one of those things where you would hear, you know, like I remember seeing the Warlock music video, and, you know, which is probably like the most maligned music video ever, you know, as far as everybody was concerned. And there was like 3 different versions. There was the PG rated version of it, and there was the R rated version of it, and then there was like an X rated version of it, and then a bunch of people were touting that there was like a triple X rated version of it. And, you know, but there's samples within the song, and you're like, and then years later you'll be watching some crummy old movie on VHS, and you're like, holy shit, that's where that came from. And, you know,
I always get that moment. The one that I found lately that's coming up a lot in the songs I'm listening to, though, for whatever reason, and it's probably one of my favorite movies of all time, so it's probably why I just keep catching it and stuff, but it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
Yes.
I hear samples of that, like even in mainstream songs, that one always pops up.
Yeah,
okay?
but that's because Texas 2 had a certain flair to it. And there were a lot of one-liners in there that, like, they would throw out at you, you know, like the dog will hunt thing, and, like, I mean, all this kind of stuff where it's just, you know, and people love to sample that kind of stuff. Yeah, and you'll constantly hear that kind of stuff. I mean, you know, I mean, hell, Alice Cooper invited Vincent Price to come on his album, and was like, you know, I just want you to be Vincent Price. I don't want you don't have to pretend to be anybody, just be Vincent Price. Which, yeah, you know, that's pretty fucking cool right there. You know?
It's definitely, it's a fun culture. It's definitely a fun culture to be a part of. And I think,
like, one of the things that, like, recently, and I had no idea about this. So, you know, one of my favorite movies of all time, to the point where I've got it, you know, tattooed on me, is The Wicker Man. And I love the soundtrack to The Wicker Man. I love The Wicker Man. I've probably watched it 500 or 600 times, if not more. But somebody that I know who runs a Wicker Man group sent me links to a band called, what was the name of the band? Was it the Sneaker Pimps? Does that sound right? I think that's right. Anyway, they covered 2 songs from The Wicker Man. And they were apparently like some band that was like big in England. I've never heard of them.
Yeah, like I know who the Sneaker Pimps are. I play one of their songs in rotation pretty regularly. Six Underground, but
they covered, if I'm right, and maybe I'm not, but I think that's right. They covered Gently Johnny from The Wicker Man, and they covered Willow's song Hey Ho.
Yeah, I could see them doing that.
So, I mean, like, but that was one of those things where I was like, they sent me this link, and I'm like, what the hell is this? And then I'm listening to it, and I'm like, what? No way, that's crazy. you know, and it's that kind of thing that it shows you that, like, you know, horror has this way of like wrapping itself around people, and you know, I don't know.
It's true. I definitely get the same feeling. I do want to talk about a movie that came out recently because I realized I haven't picked your brain about it yet. I know you and I haven't necessarily been aligned on this director's movies in the past, but have you seen Three from Hell?
No. So,
No?
I haven't. I'll be the first to admit that. As much as I enjoy Rob Zombie, I just like I can honestly say, as far as his films go, my favorite one of his films is probably Lords of Salem. I really enjoyed Lords of Salem. It had that again, that folk horror aspect that I really, really, really enjoy.
I think I would call that his most complete film.
I would agree with you. Because it had an actual like I remember when I saw that, it really like pulled me in, and I was like, I was like listening to it, and I was like, oh, okay, and then they would play the record by the Lords, and you're like listening to it, and you're like, what's it saying, that was probably my favorite of his. I saw 31 when it came out. I mean, the theater was packed with people, and everybody really seemed to enjoy it. And it was okay, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. Your mileage may vary, but like I enjoyed the music videos that came on before it much more than I enjoyed the actual film.
That's where I think his strengths possibly lie. Maybe is in the shorter, the sweet. If you have a complete framework, you can work it out. I finally came around to your side though, and I wouldn't recommend Three from Hell necessarily.
Fair enough.
It undid everything that I loved about The Devil's Rejects.
And
I think
but now Devil's Rejects and of course, House of a Thousand Maniacs.
Of course, his Maniacs was the Universal attraction that he ran.
Right. Or House of a Thousand Corpses. That's what I meant to say. Yeah. I'm sitting here and I'm like, Maniacs doesn't sound right. But House of a Thousand Corpses, Devil's Rejects, like the soundtracks for both of those, stunning, absolutely stunning. Could not have been better. But again, that goes to what I was talking about earlier, because he had stuff on there like Who's Gonna Mow Your Grass, and that really like pull you into that kind of like twangy, Southern kind of feel, and just build that whole realm for you. Yeah. Because it's kind of like, it's kind of like flipping through the channels, and and his strength has always been as a musician, at least as far as I'm concerned. It's he's a great musician, and he's great at layering sound and using those samples and creating one piece that flows into another. Hellbilly Deluxe, great album. Hellbilly Deluxe 2, not so much so, in my opinion. But that's just how it goes. I mean, I personally, I like, when I was younger, I always wanted like the splatterier the better kind of thing, and I was very much about like, you know, let's just bring on the gore, bring on the splatter, bring on, you know, this, that, and now I really find myself going back and trying to track down movies that said something to me or made me think in a different way. Things like I always go back and Donnie Darko. You know, a movie that just gets inside your head, gets under your skin, and you find yourself 2 or 3 days later sitting there and scratching your head, and you're like, fuck. And then you end up watching it again, and you know, and you're always picking out little nuances from it. You know, and that there's certain movies like that. Like I said, when Midsummer came out, I was blown away, absolutely blown away by it. I went on opening day, sat in the theater. There was like nobody in the theater, and I just kind of sat back and just beautiful, an absolutely beautiful movie.
I remember being taken by the colors, how bright everything was. Like, it was very, it was beautiful is a good, it's kind of contrasting because of how beautiful like all of it looks, and then how just completely dark and twisted it gets.
Right. But you have like, there are all the faces that are hidden in the hillsides and things hidden in the clouds and like images hidden in the tapestries, and you know, that foreshadow events that are going to come, and I mean, like I said, out of, as far as newish films go, that is easily like something that I absolutely fell in love with. I really did. You know, trying to think of like other films that I've, like newer films that I've watched recently, but I can't really think of anything that really sticks out in my mind as much as that does.
Midsummer sticks out. The last, let's see, we of course had a kid back in September, so the last
Right.
movie we saw in theaters was the new Addams Family. Have you seen the new Addams Family?
No, I did not.
You are living a better life than I. It just frustrated me, and I don't know why. Like, I can't pinpoint an accurate reason. It just didn't sit right with me to have the Addams Family yet again, and it not, like, I felt like it wasn't true at all to the original series, which is what I fell in love with. Like, I don't particularly
Right.
care for the Addams Family or the Addams Family Values. The TV series, what was it
Right.
for me, because you have
There was
cast of
something.
characters.
There was something so like sinister in the best meaning of the word from Charles Addams' little, you know, one box appearing in like the New Yorker, and you just kind of look at this and you're just like, huh. And when I was living out in Southampton here in New York, they did there was a Charles Addams retrospective at one of the art galleries, and I ended up going to it, and it had like actual like original pieces of his, and it was one of those like that was always, now don't get me wrong, like Raul Julia as Gomez was cool. It was very cool, but it wasn't, you know, Charles Addams' Family. It was a, you know, it was a family friendly kind of Addams Family. And you know,
Yes.
I like, you know, I like my weirdness to stay weird.
Yeah, it kind of, for me, if I want to watch something that's family friendly like that, I'm just gonna watch Ernest Scared Stupid.
There you go. See, love that movie. Great movie. There's, you know, that's one of those things. I mean, like, there's you know, there's some of those. One of my favorites, and this is something that I grew up watching, was Midnight Offerings, where, you know, with her worshiping the devil in her closet, and, you know, like, and it was one of these things where you're like, hey, isn't that the girl from Little House on the Prairie? What? No way. And so, you know, and she's worshiping the devil. That's interesting. And you know, you used to be able to get away with that. There's been a real, like, movement away from, you know, just allowing people to experience, you know, oh, well, what if it hurts the children? What if it scares the children? And I'm like, you know, oh, fuck it, then it does, you know, and you know, we'll see what happens.
Did you see Ready or Not?
Ready or Not.
It's the one with the lady gets married and then, like,
No, I did not. No, I didn't see that one.
That's my biggest recommendation out of the horror universe lately. And lately, I guess that came out like 2 years ago. But it very, like, I don't know how you felt about Your Next.
Your Next reminded me a lot of, like, those early 80s, like, kind of genre type stuff. You know, that's what I got from it.
Yeah, and that's kind of lately been my thing. But Ready or Not hits a very similar note, but it does it in a more intriguing way, because it takes it does the exact opposite, where it takes something sinister and makes it kid friendly. It takes something kid friendly and makes it super sinister. And
right.
So
but
to
I mean,
kind of
like,
turn that on its head, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, but, like, and if I, like, I don't know, maybe I'm just like, if I wanted some, like I mean, like, no, there's certain things like that, like I really enjoyed Krampus. That was, you know, that was good. But like if I really wanted something that was, like, kid friendly but messed up, I would just go back and watch Meet the Feebles again. I mean, there's something to be said about Muppets that are getting venereal diseases and shooting heroin.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What was the there was one that came out a few years back. It was Jim Henson's son. He made a movie using Muppet lookalikes and ended up getting sued by his father's company, Jim Henson Pictures. I can't remember what it was called, but basically it followed this Muppet private eye, and all these Muppets are getting murdered, and they're trying to figure it out. They never directly call them Muppets, but you know exactly what's happening.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't remember what it was called, but it was pretty entertaining.
That's how it goes.
It's along that same vibe. Well, Josh, before we get out of here, I feel I would be remiss if we didn't discuss where they can get some of your lovely writing and Nightmare Factory music.
The Locket and Sentence Fragments are both up on Amazon. You know, they're also on Kindle, which kills me to say, but, you know, I prefer Dead Tree versions of things. As you can see the wall behind me. But some people like that ease of Kindle, you know, and I have to admit there's something to be said about being able to have 5,000 books on my phone. But, you know, as for Nightmare Factory stuff, Gruesome Twosome is up for sale, also on Amazon still. My first book, The Horror of It All, I've still got copies of that available. Not many. It was originally a print run of 500, so we're, you know, almost 20 years on from that being released now, so there aren't that many of those left in the world.
Put it on eBay for $80.
If only.
I wouldn't do that.
If only. And and my other band, Forest of Forgotten Faith, which is more like Nordic ritualistic, like ritual music. I'm still working on an album for that. There's a few singles floating around here and there. But yeah, I mean, people can find me. I'm easy to find. I'm on Facebook. I'm pretty much everywhere. I'm on Instagram. Everything's under Josh Haney Horror. So if you type in Josh Haney Horror, chances are you're gonna find me.
Josh Haney, ladies and gentlemen.
You guys be safe out there, okay?